Shri Shri Ras Viharini Ju Ki Jai Ho. Sab Vaishnavan Ko Jai Shri Krishna. Vraja Kishori Seva Trust continues with the reading of Shri Hari Rai Ji Ke Bade Shiksha Patr. We are on day 15, letter 4, verse 5 and 6. For the sake of happiness, one should understand the form of the Lord as the abode of contradictory qualities. In his Sri Subodhaniji, Sri Vallabhacharya has described how Krishna in Vraja is simultaneously a youthful lad with his brother Balaram and an infant sitting in his mother's lap. Tika 5 and 6. Vaishnava devotees should definitely understand the Lord as the abode of contradictory qualities, because otherwise you may find his pastimes impossible or perverse, and this will destroy the seed of devotion. An example of this is doubt arising from the Damodar Leela, wherein, although the Lord's waist was very tiny, the rope with which his mother tried to bind him always remained a couple of inches too short, although she added more and more length into it. A tainted mind would think this is impossible and then ask, why does Sri Krishna cry for the sake of butter? And why then is Sri Radhaji ignoring Sri Krishna? Does he humble himself to her so much? These impure feelings of fault-finding and contrary consideration will disappear when one understands the Lord as comprising seemingly opposite attributes, and this principle should be carefully considered by the devotee. The Lord, in the form of a very beautiful 5-year-old child, sits on his mother's lap, and from there at the same time he gives other devotees the experience of many different types of pastimes. All the Lord's pastimes are eternal and full of bliss. His bliss-filled form and pastimes are one. Here follows an explanation. The Srimad Bhagavatam describes the Lord's pastimes as eternal. In Vraj, the Lord plays as a young child and at the same time sports as a lovely youth. We shouldn't think that he only acts as a young child from his birth until he grows up, and that these days never return. Because his pastimes are eternal, he can sport as an infant in his youthful years and as a youth in his childhood years. This one should recognize as the Lord's contradictory nature. Therefore, Sri Shukdevji has recounted in Srimad Bhagavatam that the Lord also plays in other ways whilst in his infant form, and Sri Vallabhacharya has in his Sri Subodhani further explained this in 7 different ways: verse, line and letter in Sri Subodhaniji, and scripture, volume, chapter and canto in Nibandha, thus revealing the purport of each verse and syllable by these 7 investigations. Thus the Lord's eternal pastimes have been described through his works. Sri Acharyaji has also revealed the modes of serving Krishna in this path of grace, by which the devotee directly experiences the Lord's birthday and his pastimes of demanding taxes, the circle dance, the festival of colours, the bower of flowers, the swing festival, etc. Observing all these eternal pastimes with heartfelt understanding, the devotee contemplates and praises them. Verses 7 and 8. In the Vraja pastime, Sri Krishna is a youthful lad and knows the gopis' love. It is written in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 2nd chapter, verse 26, that Sri Krishna lived for 11 years in Vraj with his elder brother Balaram, whilst concealing his glory. This statement has mixed purports. The Vedas describe his all-pervading form, which comprise the attributes of opulence and knowledge, etc., whilst the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam describes his pastimes in Vraja as a young lad. This very text, in the 3rd canto, 2nd discourse, recounts how he lived in Vraj for 11 years, concealing his glory, thus revealing how he appeared in Vraj simultaneously as a young boy and also as an adolescent. In actual fact, Sri Hari is quintessentially only that youthful form, especially because the Vraja devotees, the gopis, who appeared at that time as a result of the deep desire of perfected sages to sport intimately with the Lord, and who are essential to all these pastimes, are also of that youthful age. Note to verse 7. In some texts there is an alternative syllable in the verse itself, which would mean that Sri Hari appears both as the youthful lad and as the same aged gopis. Tika 7 and 8. In Vraja the Lord plays as a young lad because the 16,000 Agni Kumarikas of fire maidens are all 5 years old only, and thus they love the Lord as also being a 5-year-old. In the Rasa Shastra, the scripture explaining the nuances of love, it is stated that a husband will appear just as the wife emotionally projects, and thereby the loving mood becomes especially abundant. The Kumarikas are thus satisfied when they see the Lord as being of the same age. The pastime of the Lord up to the age of 11 are also a constant in Vraja and comprise his play as an infant and as an adolescent youth. Those maidens secretly worshipped the goddess Katyayani to attain Sri Krishna as their husband. They did this secretly so that their innermost heart and feelings would not be known, and thereby diminished to Sri Nandaraji and Sri Yashodaji. For it is said, the pure mood of such longings diminishes if exposed to others. Thus doing, they succeeded in captivating Sri Thakurji. When Sri Thakurji realized their secret inner feelings, he stole their clothes, thus revealing their bodies, and then granted them sacred bodies and returned their clothes to them, and having made them sacred too, he granted them this boon, that he would fulfill their desires by dancing the great circle dance with them in the autumn season. In this dance he was no longer an infant, but a young lad of 11, and satisfied all their longings. In this way the young gopis were able to captivate Sri Thakurji through their worship to goddess Katyayani with their most intimate secret feelings. So there are two statements and two moods. The Vedas describe his magnificence, and the Srimad Bhagavatam describes his play as a youth. The Lord is a combination of these two forms, but is purely a youth when associating with these young maidens. The Lord encompasses all states of being. In the path of lawful limitation, he is known and contemplated as all-pervading and full of glory. But the Lord who is with these cowherd maidens is the Lord whose form is comprised of pure nectar. This love-filled nectar form of the Lord exists only with the love of these maidens and nowhere else. These maidens are worthy vessels to receive the nectar form of devotion, and so he abides solely with them. Thus concludes Tika 7 and 8, very central teachings to Shri Pushti Marg. Sab Vaishnavan ko Sadar sa prem sa namra. Jai Shri Krishna, Shri Vallabhadisha ki jai, Shri Gosai ji ki jai, Aaj ke Anand ki jai, or Shri Shri Ras Viharini Jude Vijayate. We will continue tomorrow. Aaj ke Anand ki jai.